From typhoons to earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, the Philippines is no stranger to natural disasters. Most affected are residents, infrastructure, and livelihood. Immediate revival of businesses could help speed up a community's recovery. But this does not come easy, especially for the micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs. We talk about disaster resiliency and recovery for businesses as we go on the record. I'm Ruth Cabal. Good evening. Our guests for this episode, National Resilience Council President Tony Yulo Loizaga and SM Disaster Risk Reduction Consultant Alex Pama. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Good evening.
A few weeks ago, we had an episode about the effects of disasters on the residents, physically and emotionally. And now we'd like to focus on how disasters affect businesses, especially the most vulnerable ones. Yung kaya pong sinasabi natin kanina, the micro, small, and medium enterprises. So, can you tell us, ano ba usually yung effect ng mga disasters, yun na nga, sa small businesses?
Well, small businesses are usually characterized as having limited capital and a very short time in which they must resupply their stocks. So when disaster strikes, you normally have a disruption of supply lines, but you also have the interruption of their cash flow because they don't have cash coming in and out. And so what happens normally to small businesses, as what happened in Fukushima, in the big earthquake, the small business normally never recover unless they have something set aside for them to actually rely on in order to replenish their cash supply.
So mostly ang sinasabi niyo, Tony, is yung savings, no? Yeah, for the MSMEs. Okay. Alex, kasi you were head of RMC before. So kayo, from the field, ano ba yung nakikita niyong problema? Immediate, first thing na nakikita niyo?
Well, the experience we had was usually the small and medium enterprises are basically the most vulnerable ones. Ibig sabihin, in terms of preparedness, they lack the capacity to do that. Tapos pag bigla pang tamaan, what happens is their access to the resources for them to be able to recover immediately are very limited. Sabi nga ni Tony kanina, no, capital is one of them. So it heightens the vulnerability of these people in terms of, one, the preparedness, and then their capability to recover immediately becomes another problem.
Kasi lagi natin sinasabi in terms of yung preparations, like for example, local government, we have the supplies and then yung mga infrastructure to prepare yung mga evacuation centers. Pero for businesses, ano ba yung ginagawa, kailangan gawin natin para maging, when you say you have to be disaster resilient, Tony?
Well, you need to have some form of business continuity plan. No? And typically, that's a limited capacity also to prepare in terms of the smaller and the micro. No? For that, you need to anticipate what your risk is. You need to be prepared for whatever the disruption specifically that might occur. And those normally are linked to your supplies. Where do you get? What are the components for your product? Where do you get? What are you supposed to sell on a daily basis? Once those physical lines are interrupted, what is your option? So these are the challenges that the small and micro face.
Kasi all the problems are related na because you have also, pag ganyan, when you need to get supplies, yung problems sa transportation, sa infrastructure, diba, in terms of disaster. You did a lot of work for Typhoon Yolanda because I was looking at your profile. Doon, anong experience nyo doon when you did work for Yolanda, yung mga problems doon?
Well, the work that I did for Typhoon Yolanda actually had to do with working with the AFP in the Mactan Air Base. We actually brought in a specialist who helped to build a situational awareness system and to help build the logistics coordination system. That was a big challenge because communication lines were down and we also had a very limited access to aircraft. And so the immediate response of the AFP, the people on the ground, were to really anticipate the need by reaching out to the different foreign military and the different foreign governments to borrow their aircraft. So at the end of the day, we had about 14 different militaries, aircrafts, working out of Mactan Air Base because of that effort to coordinate all the different logistics.
So for that thing, you didn't just focus muna on the livelihood, but yung basic needs, eh, no?
Yes, yes, it was really
basic support
addressing the
system.
basic. Yeah.
Yes. Pero pag ganito, kasi are we talking about like sari-sari store, mga ganyan po? Can you give me an example of?
Yes, you have everything from the sari-sari store all the way up to the malls. Actually, in terms of resilience, you do have malls that are reliant on their small vendors.
Yes.
And for that, I think Alex can speak to what SM is in particular doing.
Yeah, right now the focus of SM is to help the small and medium enterprises. A big example of this is yung mga locators, yung mga tenants natin, yung mga maliliit na, yung mga kiosks
Yung mga
there.
makikita mong nandun sa loob ng mga malls. Yes.
And these are the ones who are basically more vulnerable. So right now, isang major effort ng SM is we come up in helping in so far as their business continuity. In terms of one, the training, tinitraining, we help them out in training. And number two, equally important, alam natin itong maliliit na business, they would have some challenges pag tinamaan, for example, on insurance. So what we are offering them right now is we come up with what we call the Resilience Center, wherein we provide our small and medium enterprises a certain amount of memory para they can put in some of their critical documents in soft copy para pag sila tinamaan, they can always have those documents that are necessary for them to be able to expedite getting their claims.
Yes.
Otherwise, sabi nga natin, yung maliliit, ito yung vulnerable.
Like what documents are you talking about?
Like,
mga
for example,
mga permits?
Yeah, permits, their titles if it includes and other licenses that they have. So these are the things na kung malasin at pati yung tinamaan, then at least they have soft copies they can get from. And by the way, these are free.
Yeah.
SM is offering them a free memory space in our Resilience Center for them to be able to access to pagkailangan.
Yan yung nasa Clark, tama yung
That's the one in Clark. We call it the SM Resilience Center, which we have developed both as an environmental monitoring center and as the Resilience Center for our small and medium, sa help to our small and medium enterprises.
But that's open to everyone, to every kind of business or?
Right now, we are starting with the MSMEs that would have direct relations with SM. But eventually, the guidance of Mr. Hansi is we will start offering this to related companies and businesses. And we will see how it will develop.
Ang naalala ko dyan, Alex, kasi it's very similar to yung ina-advise usually sa mga tao, di ba? Pag nasa bahay na ilagay sa plastic yung mga dokumento.
Yeah. This one is not actually the physical document that's being safe kept. These are the e-copies, which alam naman natin ngayon, marami na sa businesses that they would accept a certified copies of e-copies, no? Yung mga lisensya, yung mga iba pa mga permits. So these are the things that we are putting on the table to be able to help our small enterprises.
And very important, like we have SM, which is a big corporation also. There's such an agency as the National Resilience Council, Debaton. Can you tell us more about that? Because it's a partnership between the government and companies like SM.
Yeah, the National Resilience Council was organized in 2017, really as the convergence between the vision of Mr. Hansi and Ambassador Roberto Romulo of the Carlos P. Romulo Foundation. So we are hosted by the Romulo Foundation, but co-chaired by Mr. Hansi and Secretary Lorenzana. The idea was really to build local government's capacity, particularly in terms of resilience. And that means not just reducing risk, as in DRR, but really building capacity to prepare, adapt, and transform the risk into capacities to actually do resilience planning, action planning, towards sustainable development goals, towards the Sendai framework, towards the UN climate agreement. So these are all the goals of the National Resilience Council. We work directly with the local governments, but the public-private partnership is extremely important. And we have a 3-year program that actually is training and capacity building, as well as knowledge development on science and technology and leadership and governance for what we call evidence-based decision-making. And that's what we're trying to help instill in the local government units.
Okay, and then we will talk more about the programs of the National Resilience Council, especially yung inyong Adopt City program. So we'll be back after a quick break. This is On the Record on CNN Philippines. You're on the record on CNN Philippines. Joining us now is Francis Treñas Cruz, Executive Assistant to the Mayor of Iloilo City. Iloilo is one of the beneficiaries of National Resilience Council's Adopt a City program. Kanina we were talking about the programs nga of the council, no? But before we talk to Francis about it, what does it take for a city to become disaster resilient?
Okay, as we know, we are subject to different hazards, no? But in order for a hazard to become a disaster, we must combine it with exposure and vulnerability. And in the case of a resilient city must be able to bounce forward after a disaster and not just bounce back. We have an assumption overall that in all our cities in the Philippines, we have existing exposure and vulnerabilities. We have marginalized communities, we have infrastructure that's aging, for example. So those are all examples of exposure and vulnerability. What we want is for the city to be able to prepare, to recover, and to absorb the disruption in a way that will make it stronger in the face of future risk. So a resilient city bounces forward instead of bounces back.
Tsaka Alex, di ba, usually aside from yung sinasabi ni Ma'am, yung mga remote areas kasi minsan ang nagiging problema, usually na-isolate when there's a typhoon or...
Yeah, the main challenge, especially those communities that are basically malayo, it's their ability to resist, their ability to absorb the shocks brought about the hazards. And then usually they also are the ones who don't have the capability to accommodate and to be able to adjust and recover. So these are the challenges, and then with the programs that we're having right now with the NRC, we approach it in two sides. The sciences that are being taught to the people, the practitioners, yung kanila mga disaster officers, and how the local executives would be able to manage and govern these things based on this evidence from the sciences that we have.
So the council has this Adopt a City campaign. Can you tell us about this?
The Adopt a City campaign is really a form of engaging the private sector into the process of building that resilient city. And that process for us is a 3-year process. It begins with lectures, training, capacity building, and knowledge development in the first year for leadership and governance, specifically to begin to put a baseline. What is their current risk assessment? We need to have that local and not above the local level, because each city is a different case. And so the risk assessment is important, how they make decisions based on the risk assessment in the second year, and finally in the last year, what are the new tools that they can actually bring to the fore. And in this case, I should say that Iloilo is a little bit ahead in terms of tools and technologies that they can bring to the fore.
Okay, sige, Francis, can you tell us about it? Ano ba yung talagang pangunahing problema before ng Iloilo, and then how's the experience with the Adopt a City campaign?
Well, basically, Iloilo is prone to flooding, as you know before. But we had the flood control program, which is now giving us, a lot of relief from all the floods. But it is very timely for NRC to come in and help us out, no? And we thank NRC and Alliance Global for this program, especially that it's very timely we're coming up with our command center, and not only the command center, but we'll be having eye-care centers all over, which is from the 7 districts. And this will give us a better response time when it comes to disaster. This will be interlinked together. So it's very timely that NRC is here. They adopted Iloilo for the capacity development. They will capacitate the local government itself in the operations of the command center for disaster resilience.
So tell us about the command center. Nandiyan na lahat yung mga bombero. Ano bang makikita sa command center nyo?
Yeah, the command center is, we were given by a private sector, USAFRAC under with Quezano. For the command center, so we're using a 375 square meter area. It will incorporate the fire, the ambulances, and the police. And together, we'll have the disaster risk management office there, which is the command center, as well as the traffic. But in our separate areas for the eye care in the 7 districts, we'll also have the police, the fire, and the ambulances there. That's for a quick response.
Ilan ba ang population ngayon ng Iloilo City?
Approximately around 60,000.
Wow.
But daytime is very, very, it is very
kasi yung mga
huge.
from
because
other-
it's a center, it's a regional center.
So since then, anong naitulong nitong command center? Are you already seeing faster response na?
We will be still putting up that command center by next year.
Okay. Okay, but with the Adopt a City campaign, ano yung malaking naitulong sa inyo in terms of disaster preparedness aside from the
Well,
center?
now NRC with Taiwan has given us around 20 sensors already for earthquakes.
Oh, wow.
And
That's-
rain gauges.
And rain gauges, no? That are strategically placed all over the city. These are interconnected already. And will be online and will be live by next month.
Siyempre, so that's one of the features na rin, ano, na magkakaroon ng... Kasi kung pag ganyan, parang mas madali yung monitoring.
Yeah.
And then what are the other programs related to this?
Well, the first, actually, this is a very broad, far-reaching program in that we engage the universities also in terms of maintaining and monitoring the different data sets that will be coming in, no? So, in the case of Iloilo City, APEC Emergency Preparedness Capacity Building Center and the National Science and Technology Center for Disaster Reduction of Taiwan have come together with Iloilo City, the private sector, universities, the Manila Observatory, to integrate a multi-sensor network that will give them situational awareness all over the city. And it's really, the purpose of this is really early warning for early action. And with that, they're also undergoing training at the university and local government level in order to build capacity to use this type of data and generate the disaster-related information.
Pero tayo nung nasa NDR-RMC, gumagamit na rin ng mga ganyan sensors in many parts of the country.
yes.
Ano?
We actually built the now what we would say a very modern operation center, but the structure per se does not make the system. So what we did at that time was come up with this an operation center with an encompassing system to be able to take in the data, the information, and process this and relate it to those areas that need it. We are replicating that now in
with the
Iloilo.
cities, yeah.
And if I may, Ruth, the project basically is not just about having a command center. It's not just about having people there. It's an encompassing system, even with Iloilo. And the way the private sector comes in is, as we were mentioning earlier, Mr. Hans being a co-chair of NRC. NRC now takes the lead in the implementing these projects. And now we have, 7 cities and 1 province as the local government partners of NRC. But among these 7 cities, unti-unti nating nagkakaroon tayo ng mga adapted cities. So far, we already have 3.
Yeah.
Iloilo has been
Actually,
adopted.
4. Naga-Iriga,
Naga-Iriga has been adopted.
Cagayan de Oro.
Cagayan de Oro has been adopted. And we are continuing to entice the other big businesses
To adopt.
to adopt
Yes.
a city with NRC.
And on the other side naman, if a city wants to be adopted, ano naman ang kailangan nilang gawin?
The first criteria is there has to be a local chief executive that is willing to own the disaster risk of the city as his problem. And this was one of the criteria in choosing actually the different LGU partners that we have.
Can you explain willing to own that?
Yes.
Ano ibig sabihin?
Yes. So basically, you have a decision maker, that's the local chief executive, that will have planning, its own development plans and investment plans for the city. But in designing those plans, somehow exposure and vulnerability continue. And as the hazards come to the city, this exposure and vulnerability can continue to deepen. So we need a local chief executive to say, problema ko to. Okay, hindi to problema ng climate change or whatever. Problema
national
ko.
government
Yeah,
or-
problema ko ito. That's the first step in joining the program. And as they join the program, they will have to enroll in the 3 years that will be rolled out in the city. And there is a scoring system. We do have a metric system. So partners like PwC Philippines, for example, independently validate that scorecard.
Okay.
That scorecard. So we have partners who actually are involved in the process of also verifying and confirming that each of the cities have passed each of these phases.
Okay, when we return, tatanungin natin si Francis kung paano in-own up ni Mayor Trenya si itong disaster management sa kanyang syudad. We'll be back after a quick break. This is On the Record on CNN Philippines. You're watching On the Record on CNN Philippines. We're talking about disaster resilient cities. So Francis, sa inyo sa Iloilo City, gaano ka-importante na maging disaster resilient or disaster preparedness dun sa para kay Mayor Treñas?
Yep. Mayor Jerry is very, very forward-looking mayor. And it was during his term, during his time, the first time he was a mayor that Frank happened. And he knows, he understands that he has to address this. His city has to be resilient in order for business to continue to flourish. And if your city is not resilient, you won't get investors. You won't have business continuity.
Noong when you had the Typhoon Frank, ano bang naging problema with the businesses? Gaano kahirap for you to recover?
It was difficult. It was a mess. No? But the Mayor Jerry then knew that everything has to continue. If you look at Mindanao now, you see those people having those placards to help us. We had that. But there's the best statement that we got was from an investor who came in just 3 weeks later. And he said, Francis, your city was devastated 3 weeks ago, but it's impressive. It's like nothing happened here. Everything has to continue in its normalcy. You have to spend money. People were walking on the streets after it happened like zombies, but you have to spend in order for the local economy to move, in order for everything to go back to normalcy.
I was looking at yung kanina when we had the break yung comments dito sa Facebook. May nagsabi dito si CK Manalansan, this should be implemented and practiced in other places daw in the Philippines. Ano pa ba yung mga ibang lugar na pwedeng ma-adapt na what kind of cities and yung requirements?
We're calling on all cities, number one. Most of our cities are in fact urban and they're coastal. No? So the dense population is an urban characteristic. And they're coastal. Coastal cities are particularly exposed and vulnerable because, in fact, those are where the typhoon tracks come. Those are where, in fact, there might be liquefaction or subsidence or other types of physical changes going on. What we'd like to say also is that City of Manila, I should say, has just signed up as one of our cities.
Okay.
And we are now looking for partners, stakeholders in the City of Manila to join us in rolling out this program. There are two other features to the Adopt a City. And one is actually the Barangay Resilience Scorecard. So we don't just make an assessment at the top, where the local chief executive is actually making those decisions. We go down to the level of the barangay. And this is a system that we are now testing in Muntinlupa City. They're the first city to have the Barangay Scorecard. And we have a digital literacy program for the youth, wherein we're involving the youth together with IBM Philippines, SM Prime, Asia Pacific College, National University, in actually coming up with ideas for solutions to their local resilience problems. So we are multifaceted in terms of the Adopt a City program, barangay, youth sector, and the local chief executive.
Gusto ko na lang din kayong itanong kasi minsan yung attitude ng mga Filipinos pag may disaster or whatever, mga typhoons, earthquake, parang umaasa sa dole-out. So this is, how do you see that?
This is precisely what we are wanting to veer away from. The resilience has to do with the capacity to self-organize. The city must be able to self-organize, as what Francis had pointed out in Typhoon Frank. Iloilo City was able to clean itself up and then make it possible for the businesses to open.
Alex, yung kanina you were mentioning na sana some other companies would come in.
Yeah. Actually, in the program for Adopt a City, we're now starting this with the local government units that we are partnering with, NRC is partnering with. But as it is right now, I mentioned there were, I think, 3 cities that have already been adopted. And the other cities, as I was saying, we're working on it. Primarily, what we intend to do is, for example, we start with big corporations who have investments in those cities. Because for them to invest in adapting a city, it's not a question of helping the city. We have parameters on what kind of help they're going to give the city in line with what the scorecard that we have doon sa sinasabi kanina ni Tony. So may metrics tayo. So it's not just a question, for example, an XYZ company, I will adopt city ABC. And then bahala na. It's not what they want to give the city, but it's what the city needs in line with the resilience.
Siguro malasakit na rin kung nasaan sila nag-ooperate, ano, yung mga negosyo na
Yeah,
yun.
because it's an investment to a certain extent, but I mean, disaster resilience makes good business sense.
Yeah.
So they invest on that for purposes of the altruistic side of it, of their profitability, but at the same time addressing the communities that they are serving. So it's a symbiotic thing.
Okay, any other programs related to this na makakatulong din for disaster resiliency?
We in relation to the Adapt the City, right now, when we look at these cities that we have already adopted, it's in the process of now identifying, like for example in Iloilo, Alliance Global has just adopted Iloilo, and I think we're now in the process of looking at what exactly those resilience needs that Iloilo need, that Alliance Global or Mega World can start investing in these projects.
And then other programs na related pa po?
Well, perhaps it's worth mentioning, and this is also a city that we are looking for corporations to actually adopt, is Zamboanga City. A very special case in Zamboanga City where not only are they exposed to certain hazards, they also have a human security problem. And so their risk is compounded always by their human security issue.
Yeah.
And so for a city like Zamboanga, and this has become of keen interest to the head of the UN Office of Disaster Risk Reduction. She would like to see how Zamboanga can flourish under the Adopt a City program and the scorecard system, despite their complications in terms of security.
Okay, that's one thing we will look forward to, and we're trying to find out. Again, thank you very much to our guests. That's On the Record. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ruth Cabal.